Hi, we're back to talk about this time the differences between the housing provider and the service manager. The service manager under law is the not the person but the group that hands out the money for RGIs and is responsible overall for how a co-op is run or managed and if it goes outside the law. So in this case in Toronto, it would be Toronto Shelter Housing and Support. The housing provider is the cooperative. That would be the staff and board who are responsible. Now, under Section 4.1 of the Housing Services Act, for the purposes of Section 5 and 6, it is a matter of provincial interest that there be a system of housing and homelessness services that A, is focused on achieving positive outcomes for individuals and family, and B, addresses the housing needs of individuals and families in order to help address other challenges they may be facing. F states, quote, treat individuals and families with respect and dignity. J states, ensure appropriate accountability for public funding. And K states, support economic prosperity. And point 5, a service manager, that would be Toronto Shelter Housing and Support, remains responsible for the exercise or performance of any delegated powers or duties. Now, often when resident members complain to Toronto Shelter Housing and Support, they're sent to CHF et al., and CHF et al. Sends them back to the board. You can see the merry-go-round that's going on. Well, what should be happening under law is an audit or investigation can take place by the service manager. A service manager, this is number 82.1, may appoint a person to conduct an audit or investigation to ensure that a housing provider is complying with this act and the regulations. And what can trigger events? Under point number 83.1, a housing provider contravenes this act or the regulations. That means the housing provider, who is the cooperative, contravenes. Number 9, the housing provider or co-op incurs an expenditure that is, in the opinion of the service manager, substantial and excessive. Or point number 11, in the opinion of the service manager, the housing provider has failed to operate a designating housing project properly. Now, the remedies for these problems, and certainly the housing manager, Toronto Shelter Housing and Support, has remedies at its hand. They can, under point number 4, exercise any of the powers or perform any of the duties of the housing provider under this act. Or 2, act as the housing provider with respect to all or part of the assets, liabilities, and undertakings of the housing provider, including its housing project. Or number 5, the housing manager may appoint an operational advisor for the housing provider. Number 6, the service manager may appoint an interim receiver or interim receiver manager for the housing provider. And in number 8, the service manager may remove some or all of the directors of the deemed housing provider, regardless of whether they were elected or appointed or became directors by virtue of their office. And number 9, the service manager may appoint one or more individuals as directors of the housing provider. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, Toronto Shelter Housing and Support, or the service manager, has a number of options that it can exercise. It seems, though, that it's not interested in doing that, and it just turns everybody over to CHF. Now, isn't it interesting that these people are being paid fairly handsomely to do their job and to make sure that the co-op housing sector is run properly? Not until you have to get to a superior court or a judicial review or something do they start to do something. This is important and worth knowing, and they need to be made accountable to the taxpayers. And once again, we invite anybody from Toronto Shelter Housing and Support to be interviewed, to respond to these videos that are being put up with the intention to educate resident members, because they are not getting the information they need in order to deal with the problems that they're dealing with. So anytime you want to be interviewed and give your side of the story, or tell us why you're not engaging in the ways that it appears you should be engaging under the law, we'd be happy to interview and try and get to the bottom of this. Thanks very much, folks. See you next time.